In this video, and probably we might need another one as well, we'll start talking about Descartes' conception of knowledge. We referred to these themes in previous videos, but today we are going to go a bit deeper into those, and as we go on studying Descartes, we will be going more deeper and getting more specific into his ideas and conceptions. So Descartes' conception of knowledge. Okay, what we have seen so far is that start to begin a new beginning. You want to start from zero. To start from clean slate. And you start, and as we saw in previous video, in order to start anew, you have to do two things. A negative thing, you have to destroy, or at least suspend, or rub off from your slate what you have learned already, or what you already have. So that's the destructive part, and then you build a new. So whenever you go on such a journey where you are starting from anew, in the sense that you rub off your what went previously and start totally anew, you must have some dissatisfaction. You must be dissatisfied with the present situation. Otherwise, why would you go and demolish what you have and start to build anew? And Descartes, as we will see, say so much himself. So if you are starting anew like Descartes, you must have some dissatisfaction. You must be dissatisfied with the present, in this case, the system of knowledge, system of instruction, conception of knowledge. So you try to come up with a new conception of knowledge. And as we already said, dissatisfaction can be of two types. Partial dissatisfaction. You think there are some problems with the present system, but you think you still can be rescued, so you go on the line of reform. Descartes doesn't choose this line, so he goes in the lane of revolution, and revolution means destroying or bracketing at least what you have already and starting afresh anew. So you might get bricks from here, but you build new structures, new foundation, and so forth, but you don't take the overall structure or system. So if you are starting anew in Descartes' sense, you must have some sort of dissatisfaction. And so the question arises, and this is our second point here: what is the dissatisfaction? What is the dissatisfaction? So fundamental dissatisfaction, as we saw, are two. First is his problem with authority. And by this he means that we are given instructions from above by teachers or whoever, but we don't that's what he means. We don't discover or establish both discover, establish the truth of things which we are taught ourselves. So, we are instructed in schools and universities. We are given reasons. We are trained in certain methods. We are trained in logic. But those methods, those logic, we have never tested ourselves. In a sense, at some point, we have relied on others. And that's the problem with our authority, according to Descartes, really. So his point is deeper than many people realize. He's not saying that people believe something merely based on authority. I think some commentators seem to think that, but that's not true. Because if this was the case, we can just, that will require reform. We would have to, come up with better reasons. But what he means is that if we don't discover something and establish something or truth of something individually ourselves, at least he felt himself, he is not asking all of us to go on his line, but he can't be fully satisfied with the truth of fundamental truth of the fundamentals of the fundamental principles on which all our knowledge is based. If I don't discover the truth of those ourselves, we are necessarily going to be relying on others at some points in the chain of reasoning. So that was his point. So that's why he wanted to, as we see, it's very subjective, very individualistic conception of knowledge. And that's why it's also very individualistic in that sense. We'll come back to that. So in that sense, authority is a problem. So that's the first reason for dissatisfaction. Okay. Authority in the sense I described, not in the superficial sense that he is not accusing scholastics and medieval Aristotelians of committing the informal fallacy, which is known as appeal to authority. I've seen some commentators saying that, but that's just ridiculous. So, so that's it, the first thing. The second is second dissatisfaction he has with the reason. Now, what dissatisfaction he has there? The dissatisfaction, it's related to what I said. So there are two types of reason. One is trained reasons. So you are trained. And this training is given to you in your schools, trained reason. So you are trained in logic, method, or even mathematics. Although Descartes thought mathematics was one of the best disciplines in terms of, its integrity. But trained reason in the sense that you are trained in schools how to think. So your reason is no longer your natural reason. So and it follows from the first point of dissatisfaction with the authority. This reason is, in a sense, social reason. Just on a higher stage, so you are in school or universities. So in a way, in society, our reason is socialized. Universities and schools are, the second step, a more sophisticated step in that socialization. So for Descartes, that's reliance on authority, this sort of reason. So that we want to go back to natural reason. That's why I called it subjective reason, because the way we go back to the natural reason is shut ourselves off from the external influences of education, socialization. That's why this goes back to this whole thing about starting from scratch, starting from the beginning, starting anew in terms of destroying what you got from outside. And once you have done that, then you can use your natural reason. You can see in terms of natural light. So you have to really go into a sort of meditations. We'll see if we ever, when we when we get to reading his actual books, meditation. So isolation is important. Concentration is important. So you are aware that. So attentiveness is very important in that way. Okay, so these are 2 points of dissatisfaction, sorry. The reliance on authority, a reliance on trained reason instead of natural or subjective reason. So that's why subjectivism or extreme subjectivism, and even subjectivism which becomes solipsism, as we'll see. This extreme subjectivism is necessitated because he wants to get rid of all the social influences. Somehow he thinks that you yourself in your extreme solitude are more assured to reach certainty and certain knowledge than, through social influences. So this also obviously this also gives you an idea about his conception of human society and its relation to individuals and etc. So it's a sort of extreme individualism is implicit in, it's not entirely explicit. So these were two. So he was he started to begin anew because he was dissatisfied because of. And the third point is what are the. So he's dissatisfied because of certain problems. And what are the certain manifestations of these problems? The first thing is the existence of disputes and doubts. So that was for him a manifestation of this problem. Because according to Descartes, that's what he thought. If we actually rely on our natural, what we had learned in school was truth, then there shouldn't be any disputes, there shouldn't be any doubts. So implicit in this is the conception of knowledge, where at least the fundamental principles of knowledge should be based on absolute certainty. So I'll read, I picked up a paragraph where he talks about this. It would be good to read it. This is from the philosophical writings of. I have the printed version, but I just grabbed this one so you can see it properly. It's the philosophical writings of Descartes in 2 volumes, edited by John Cottingham. These are the best translation of Descartes' philosophical works, and John Cottingham is an excellent Descartes scholar and excellent philosopher as well. He has retired now, but he's a British I like him a lot. So if you want to read Descartes, I think these two volumes are good. So I have my own copy is all marked here, so I will just find the paragraph. It's on page 112. Page 112. Okay, and these side marks are side numbers are numbers on the margins are the numbers of the original French works of collected works of Descartes. So if you want to check the original quotations up, and we will do sometime, but at the moment this is pretty straightforward. We don't need to. So here's the thing. Where Descartes, so Discourse on Method is one of his autobiographical work where he narrates his internal journey. So after we finish with this introduction to Descartes, I hope to go through this short work and other short works like Meditations. Okay, so here's the one from my child at the bottom of page number 112. See, from my childhood, I have been nourished upon letters. So he belongs to a middle class. So they had sent him to good schools, and because I was persuaded by their means, and because I was persuaded that by their means, and that he means by letters, one could acquire clear and certain knowledge. So he says that when he went to schools and studied there and he was a good student, he thought that what he would acquire would be clear and certain knowledge. So that he wants. And the third thing, it would be useful in life. So that's why I was extremely eager to learn them. But as soon as I had completed the course of study, so once he became, whatever he had, he had a higher studies and he was a very well-studied person, course at the end of which one is normally admitted to the ranks of the learned, I completely changed my opinion as to what? That what you acquire is a clear and certain knowledge and useful for life. For I found myself beset by so many doubts and errors. So doubts and errors. Doubts and errors. Just noting it down so we can. Doubts and errors. And yet I was, For I found myself beset by so many doubts and errors that I came to think that I had gained nothing from my attempts to become educated, but increasing recognition of my ignorance. So he had thought that going to schools would give him certain knowledge, clear knowledge. But what he found was disputes, unending disputes and unending doubts. And errors, etc. And he is also implying that the knowledge he got was not that useful for life. He wanted a knowledge. So he is basically trying to redefine the conception of knowledge. And this also sort of proved my point that by authority he doesn't mean blind imitation, because if they were relying on authority, why were there so many disputes anyway and doubts? You would think that there would be more disputes and doubts if you're relying on your subjective reason. But his obviously, see, his conception on knowledge is totally different. He thinks that socially generated knowledge leads to disputes and doubts, but when you go back to natural law, you can see the truth, and then all disputes and doubts and errors will go away and you will get the useful knowledge. So that's the first manifestation of dissatisfaction with the knowledge he got from And in the same paragraph, we also came across the second manifestation, which is confused ideas. And I gave last time the example of scholastic trying to differentiate between substance and quantity or extension. So, and in case, by substance, this what substance, corporeal substance. So Descartes' point was that, how can, if we define quantity in terms of extension, anything which occupies space, either substance is extension, or if it is not an extension, it's not a corporeal substance. But they thought that it was a substance but not extension. And it wasn't incorporeal substance. So that was the result of confusion. So you have doubts, you have errors, you have unending disputes, and knowledge is not certain, and it's not clear, it's confused ideas. And that's because they rely on authority and socially trained reason rather than relying on subjective or natural reason, which we all have in ourselves. So from that, he thought that what he needed was Descartes. So that's our fourth point. From this, from third point follows that what we need is certainty. But certainty, his thing of certainty is very different from scholastic certainty or even Aristotelian certainty, because as we will see in his method at some point, the certainty is for him what could not be doubted. And as we saw, he was very puzzled, upset by doubts and disputes. Oh God. So he wants certainty. So he is looking for knowledge which is certain, and the knowledge he got was not certain because it leads to disputes. And he wants knowledge which is based on clear and distinct ideas. In other words, knowledge which is not. So, and his method is to fifth. And that's very important because since he thought that this situation was the result of our reliance on trained reason, socially influenced reason, what we need is focus on the self, ourself. Focus on the self, but not all part of self, because self is also socially determined here and hence influenced. So what we need is cut this self away from. Cut this self away from society and its influences. So that's why you want to go into isolation. We will see that how he does it, isolation. So he basically runs away from France. He lives in Holland and Germany and all over the Europe where nobody knows him. And he shuts himself in his room, and in the mornings or whenever he gets up, he focuses on himself in a way that he is very meditative and attentive, so that no external influence can come into his meditations, and he can see from his inner natural light. So truth for him is inside, but inside which is stripped of all the influences of the outside. That's why you see that he is not trying to any political revolution. He is not even trying to reform and revolutionize universities. That's why he didn't found any university. He didn't even get a job in university, unlike Luther, for example. What he goes, he just run away from even France. He gets out of the army where he was captain or whatever he was, and goes to Holland. Mostly he lives in Holland, in remote villages where nobody knows him. He obviously has money, so he keeps his correspondence, but when he does his meditation, he's shut in his room, and we'll see that. So yeah, that's very important. So his solution is self-centered knowledge in the sense in which we just explained. Now I want to give you another passage from the same book, Discourse on the Method, we just saw, just after the passage we read on. So we read the passage from page number 112 and 113. Now this passage is on page number 117. So let's see. I looked at Cottingham's translation again. Or Cottingham's edited work. So this is edited by Cottingham, but and many of the words are translated by him, but there are some translation which are done by other people which he has selected, so we can rely on both of these translations. So what does he say? And that will this passage will also tell us about another thing which we haven't mentioned yet, about his conception of knowledge. So one day we will study the whole of this book, but at the moment I am interested in this paragraph. It starts from admittedly, and we will read it slowly. So, admittedly, we never see people pulling down all the houses of a society, of a city, for the sole purpose of rebuilding them in a different style to make the streets more attractive. But we do see many individuals having their houses pulled down in order to rebuild them. Some even being forced to do so when the houses are in danger of falling down, and their foundations are insecure. So that's here his analogy. So the house or the building of knowledge which he has insecure foundation. So he can't just rely on partial fixes. He has to demolish the building and then focuses on building. So his conception of knowledge as building, we'll go back to that, and focuses on foundation, because if foundations are good, the whole building would be good. And as we mentioned, his this high conception of knowledge as certain knowledge, it's mostly pertains to foundations. So for the non-foundational knowledge, his criteria is less stringent. Anyway, so this example convinced me that it would be unreasonable for an individual to plan to reform a state by changing it from the foundations up and overturning it in order to set it up again, or again for him to plan to reform the body of the sciences or the established order of teaching them in schools. Why? I mean, he doesn't say that, but what is needed is a self-focused reconstruction first, for the reason we just mentioned. But regarding the opinions to which I had hitherto given credence, I thought that I could not do better than undertake to get rid of them. So his own personal foundation knowledge, he can just demolish it all at one go. So reform won't do, in order to replace them afterward with better ones. So he is not demolishing for the demolishing sake. He has in his mind reconstruction as well. But this construction is the sort of construction which cannot happen without this destruction. And destruction, all his knowledge has to go in one go. So I thought that I could not do better than undertake to get rid of them all at one go in order to replace them afterwards with better ones, or with the same ones once I squared them with the standards of reason. And what is this standard of reason would be very important. And in this way, I thought... So let's do it again. This example convinced me that it would be unreasonable for an individual to plan to reform a state by changing it from the foundations up and overturning it in order to set it up again, or again for him to plan a reform of the body of the sciences or the established order of teaching them in the schools. But regarding the opinions to which I had hitherto given credence, I thought that I could not do better than undertake to get rid of them all at one go. So that one go, that's knowledge. I mean, that's revolution, in order to replace them, the better ones, or with the same ones, and I had squared them with the standard of reason. And what is the standard of reason? The standard of reason is the subjective reason, as we mentioned the reason. So what he is saying here is that what he's going to do is, so it's a building. Knowledge is like a building with, foundations which are very weak. So you have to destroy this building and build on new foundations. But you can't do this through political or even educational revolution, because you have to focus on your own self and your own opinions. At least he thought so about himself. And get rid of all your opinions you had learned from school in one go, and then you reconstruct based on standards of reasons. Standards of reason. Standard of reason. What is for him a standard of reason? Well, first, no reliance on socially trained reason. Get rid of all social and educational instruction. So your self is bare. And you focus on that self. And then you will get to see things through natural light. And through that you will discover fundamental principles which would provide the foundation for the building of your new knowledge. And hopefully other people will do the same, and that's how you would ultimately lead to a new politics and new educational system. That I'm just driving political analysis apart. So this is Descartes' rational scheme, or his standard of reasons. Now his conception of what do we learn I think should we do another video? Yeah, it's too long. So I think we have covered a lot of ground, and now we just have to sum up what is the actual conception of knowledge, and we'll do that in the next video.